Hi, I'm Professor Green, and tonight we'll be doing Chapter 10, Part 1. As you can see, it's dark outside, a little bit of shadow, but let's go ahead and let me share my screen. The most important thing is that you hear my voice and we see the slides. So let's go ahead and open up organizational behavior, relationships, and networks. And I think if there is one thing that my previous MBA students say that I am known for, it is networking. So although I'm passionate about all the curriculum in this course, this is probably my sweet spot. So, chapter learning objectives explain how to develop and maintain strong work relationships. I've really enjoyed the people I've worked with for the most part. I enjoy always the work that I do. I'm fortunate that I've been able to change jobs if I don't like the work that I'm doing. And that has allowed me to really feel, happy often when I go to work and choose who I want to work with. And so I built these really nice networks. We're going to define networks and show how they work and describe how to leverage the power of networks for professional and organizational success. And this is also why I feel like I love people who've gotten an MBA, because I feel like just we have a lot in common, that they teach this in the curriculum, right? You don't learn this in your PhD, you don't learn this in your master's or film, etc. How to network. And I just think it's just so valuable. So there are these two situations with which I think you've heard before, right? Candidate A is new to the area, candidate B was referred by somebody. Who's going to get the job, right? Most likely candidate B, because they know the candidate a little bit more, right? They're taking less of a risk. And I feel like it's not because they're being favored, but it's because the company, when they hire someone, it's a big risk. There are a lot of unknowns, but you try and minimize those risks. And one of the ways to do that is by finding out more about a candidate in other ways. And this is the other one about the candidate who has a 3.5 GPA, 2 semesters of experience working on campus. Candidate B has a 3.0 and is family friends with the department chair because they live on the same street. Being qualified for the position, who is more likely to get a favorable nod? So they're working as a teaching assistant, as a full tuition reimbursement. And so, yeah, that's a tough one because, again, somebody has experience, but again, they're hiring someone and this is a long-term commitment. They're investing in this person. And if they know that person and they feel like they over years, then most likely they'll go with somebody that they know. So whether you're trying to find a summer internship, to get a job, get access to an influential person, um, knowing people who are willing to provide support and help make connections is critical to success, right? I'm not, I'm biased because I find that this is so helpful, but everybody says this, right? And here's Ben and Jerry saying, right, it's not what you know, it's what you know and who you know, right? So, yeah, so it's a combination of both. So, having your connection, being able to leverage them are super important. And that comes from knowing how to build strong relationships and networks. So let's create a science out of this and understand how best to network. The first part of the chapter talks about interpersonal relationships, explaining how to develop and maintain strong work relationships. Identify the kinds of relationships that matter in the workplace, right? Your boss, your coworkers. Explain how relationships are developed. How can you proactively work on this, right? This doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. And understand how to build and maintain good relationships. And maybe people in the arts would laugh at us and think, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is included in a course, but it is. And it's very valuable. I will tell you from experience. So what kind of relationships matters, right? Your relationship with your manager, right? Because they say people don't leave organizations, they leave a manager, right? And I feel that's 100% true, right? When I've quit jobs, moved on, it's because I just didn't love my manager. And yeah, and when I love my manager, even though I hated the job, I would stay. Now at this stage in my career, I only choose jobs based on the manager. I don't really care what I'm doing. As long as I have a good manager, that's all that makes the difference. relationships with teammates, relationships with customers, suppliers, and professional connections. So they're all critical in determining whether and how we will be effective in our jobs. And the course says that, at the beginning of your career, very often you're not at a position to really be developing these things. You're more working on the functionality of your job. And so there isn't a ton of networking necessarily. In my experience, even in my first jobs, I was in, these management associate programs. So even though we were still kind of learning the basics of the job, we had each other. And I found that that was really helpful. And oh my goodness, I'm still friends with those people now, 30 years later. So, yeah, just don't be surprised if at the beginning of your career, you're not necessarily taking full advantage of this. Leader member relationships. So, right. So we're going to talk a little bit about your relationship with your manager. Right. A bad relationship can lead to all kinds of pleasant outcomes for an employee. So again, if you're a manager, think about how important it is that you have a good relationship with your subordinates, right? Even as professors, we sometimes forget about that. I mean, we do, but we don't, right? We're managing the relationships with the students. Employees with bad managerial relationships are less satisfied in their jobs, less motivated, experience greater burnout, and receive lower performance evaluations, right? So again, important to connect with your manager. And as I said, people leave managers, not their companies. And so now let's talk about key terms here. The LMX theory, leader-member exchange, is the study of the manager-subordinate relationship. Then we have high-quality LMX relationships, and then low-quality LMX relationships. And if we have low-quality relationships, low trust, little respect, and contractual exchanges, just like yes or no answers, also it can build up our hostility and resentment, right? We do not want to be here, right? So again, anytime my manager says, let's get together, yes, I'm happy. Yep, I'm there. So I make opportunities to see him. Well, I have two managers now. I have my manager of my department, and then I have the dean, and I have the associate dean too. So I guess in some ways I have three managers. Co-worker relationships. So this is also extremely important because the co-workers make the place. Yeah. So if you have great co-workers, it makes it so much easier to come to work. And now as hierarchies continue to be flattened, as I've said throughout this curriculum, they're more collaborative and team-based work arrangements. So you're not just working in your little silo and reporting up to your manager the work that you've done every day, right? You're working with the team, and if you want to have a happy and content workplace, it's really important to work on your relationship with your coworkers. Getting along and having high levels of trust with coworkers can make all the difference in one's energy level, satisfaction, engagement, and performance. And I definitely feel like, when I first came on board full-time, I already had some good colleagues here at LMU, but I made a point to get to know more because I felt like, wow, like now I'm in it, now I've dedicated my life full-time, 40 hours a week or more, right? So I better make it a good experience. Right. Heaven is the work of the best and kindest men and women. So that's what they're saying. Like, in heaven, is like where we'll work with people who are just like the most kind. And yeah, many times we feel like that. Many of us feel like that here at LMU. But hell is other people. So yeah, when we don't have colleagues that we really enjoy and get along with. And I think you all can see that here in your MBA cohort. I think for the most part here at LMU, that people like their cohort, they get along with people that they're in the classroom with. And I think, again, that's really helpful to bringing people back into class every day. So the TMX represents the extent to which team members contribute ideas, feedback, and assistance to one another. And this term shows up here again that we saw either earlier in this course, psychological safety, the ability to speak openly and freely with one another without fear of reprimand or negative consequence. And there's value, right, in having employees coming to the workplace with psychological safety. When I worked at the wonderful company, I felt like people are continuously getting judged and criticized. And that's why I always say wonderful is not always so wonderful. I did not feel a lot of psychological safety, unfortunately. Yeah, from day one, throughout the 10 years that I was there, for better or for worse. Boundary spanning relationships. So, boundary spanning is, oh, before I move on to the next slide, right, they were saying that extroverts I sometimes feel more engaged when the team X is high, right? So contributing ideas, feedback, assistance, right? Extroverts like this type of thing, so they might feel more engaged here. And if you have an extrovert on your team, that might work for them. And then also I have here that members have high identity as team members rather than individuals. So that's kind of a nice little side effect, or kind of, chicken or the egg type of thing. But, um, you know, members start to develop this identity as a team member, as opposed to who they are individually. And that's kind of a good thing at times. I remember, again, when I was back at Citigroup, we were so excited, so proud to be part of this, global engineering team. And, our identities were all about, we were part of global engineering for servers and desktops for Citigroup, worldwide. And that was like, it was just an exciting time. We hung out tonight every day together after work, and yeah, it was really just a nice time to be part of City and part of this group. So back to the curriculum here, boundary spanning relationships. So cross boundaries within and outside the relationship. And again, this is important because of the more flat organization. So building relationships across hierarchical levels, as with those higher up in the organization. So knowing your manager, knowing your manager's colleagues on a personal level. This is what I was saying, you won't be doing necessarily at the beginning of your career because you're more focused on the functions. But very quickly, as you start to network, you get to know people throughout the organization. Building relationships across departmental or divisional boundaries, from sales to IT to operations, from, the Asia to Europe to Latin America, etc. It involves building relationships with suppliers, distributors, customers, the profession, and the community. And today I shared a role from a university that we work with, a Jesuit university in Cordoba in Spain. And I'm sure the dean is going to be like, oh wow, that's so nice that she shared that on LinkedIn. It's like her colleague and at this school in Cordoba. And yeah, because I have a relationship with that person too, right? Because I've been to conferences, and we've hosted events for them here in LA. So how are relationships developed? So now that we understand the importance of relationship, we have to understand, how do they actually develop? How do they work? How can we make this happen? Relationship building, which happens through social exchange. It's the process of building relationships through reciprocal interactions between people. And again, maybe this goes back to my Catholic background, but like, right, let me help you. And then maybe in the future, you can help me, type of thing. So action contingent upon a rewarding reaction. The goal in exchange and in healthy relationships is to make sure that what we give is balanced with what we receive. Reciprocity. The norm of reciprocity is the expectation that when one person does something for someone else, the other will reciprocate or pay us back. And I think, I've taught twice on teaching teams. So when I first came to LMU, I taught on the business. I still teach on the business ethics team. Already getting to the punchline. I teach business ethics because I really enjoy the course lead. He, asked me to teach the course on his team, but then he immediately started to give me leadership opportunities, and he met with me regularly, and he introduced me to people, etc. So it was like this amazing exchange. Then I got asked to teach on the Business for Good team. And even though they were very nice, I felt like I was giving, but not necessarily receiving a lot in exchange for what I valued. And so I decided then to no longer teach on the Business for Good team. I will teach it in the MBA, but only because the EMBA course Rosalie is a friend of mine. And yeah, and so that's just an example of, social exchange on like, we need to agree on what we think is a good thing or not a good thing and what the value is on that. So reciprocity components. So here we are just finishing up the first section of chapter 10. There's going to be a figure 10.1. And what is given back is the same as what was received, right? So again, I felt like I was giving a lot to this business for good class, and I wasn't necessarily being given back, leadership opportunities or introductions. I mean, the course lady wasn't here half the time, so it wasn't really his fault, but it just wasn't what I was looking for in a teaching team. Immediacy, the time span for reciprocation is short, especially if you don't know the person very well, which we'll see. If you're in a family, it's different. It's very long, especially child rearing. You give a lot to a child. You hope eventually you get something back when they, move out of the house and they're successful, well-adjusted adults. But the time span, 20 years, right? Minimum. But if you don't know someone very well, right, the time span needs to be very short because they don't know you. They don't know when exactly you'll get something back. And the interest, the motive for the exchange, self-interest, mutual interest, or others' interests. So, so here we are in this 10.1. So, relationship quality, high. This is, family or parent-child. And, the immediacy can be, and equivalence can be, very, very long, et cetera, for the reciprocity component. For the interest, self or mutual. But the immediacy and equivalence, it can be very low, that I don't, as we parents, we give it out so much, but we don't necessarily get a portion of that back, but that's just the way it rolls. So trust, we could talk a lot about that, but I think you all hopefully will get the idea. Trust is the belief in reliability, veracity, or ability of someone or something. When someone trusts another, they are willing to be vulnerable with them. In social exchange, trust is the belief in the intention and ability of the other to maintain healthy reciprocity. If trust is not present, relationships will stay in lower quality. They will be limited to transactional economic exchanges. And guided by legalities and contractual terms and conditions, right? I'm sure you've all been in a situation where you don't trust somebody, so you want to get a contract signed, you want to make sure that they send you an IOU, maybe siblings, younger brothers or sisters, right? You might not trust them because they don't necessarily understand what trust is quite yet. And just trust develops through an exchange process. And it starts with a disclosure and opening up about oneself or sharing a revelation. And I think this is so interesting, that we start to slowly, divulge information and kind of read if the person is reciprocal to that information or not. And, I see this a lot because I meet mothers all the time, and we're all kind of searching for mom friends. And, raising children is a very personal experience. And so, right, so you kind of, test the waters. You talk about very high level things. And then eventually, as you see these mothers again and again, you start to kind of share something and you wonder, like, are they going to share something back? And then if they do, or if they're responding to something, then you feel like you can go deeper. And so then it builds trust, I can go on and on about this, but yeah, I was just sharing with a mother, about she wants to travel more with her kids. And so we were trading stories about flying on Air France. And that helped build trust throughout our relationship. So how do we build and maintain good relationships? People think that good relationships naturally happen, right? I hope you're old enough to know that they don't, right? It takes work, especially in marriages. When a relationship is struggling, they tend to blame their partners without assigning cause to themselves. And right, if we're emotionally intelligent, emotionally aware, we know that we all have a role in our relationships. there's something wrong with him or she's just impossible to deal with. But, relationships are more manageable than we think they are. If we reach out and connect with someone, then it's usually easier to resolve and continue a good relationship than we think it is. It takes knowing how to work and the steps that go into developing them more effectively. So if you've ever, been in that situation, reaching out is always helpful, right? Instead of having resentments and coming up with stories. So the next 3 slides are going to talk a little bit about relational testing, repair, and then, what if we go off the deep end and we can't go back? So relational testing, they have this example of chutes and ladders. So the process of consciously or subconsciously noting how a reciprocal exchange makes one feel about another person. And, sometimes just like dating, right? Sometimes we can go too quick. And then, we're climbing, and then we shoot back down. We, we tell them too much. There's a little bit of a scorekeeping in this, or we break their trust, whatever it might be. So we want to make sure that we kind of slowly move up the scale into a high relationship quality. And I find that sometimes if I meet someone who kind of reminds me of somebody else or is in a similar role to someone that I've worked with before, then I start climbing up really fast, thinking that I know them, but actually they're a different individual. And then I end up, crashing. So again, really important to invest in the person, in the individual that we're getting to know. And, we also talk about competency versus integrity-based transgressions. So if you, fall down one of these chutes here, sometimes the competency transgression is about you didn't realize that you were making a mistake. You didn't realize that you were offending them. It was unintentional. There was a lack of skill or knowledge. I just had a fellow professor. She was moving ahead with a project, and I was like, "Wait," and she kind of she hurt my feelings, but I was like, "Wait, I think you need to check with our manager," and she didn't realize it, and so then she kind of said, "Oh, I didn't realize that," and we repaired it very quickly. But then we also have integrity-based transactions where, there's bad mathing and dishonesty, and that's not good. Then you kind of, you're meant to fall down this chute and go back to the beginning. So relational repair is what we talk about next, going back through the relational testing process with the intent of rebuilding relationship quality, returning to active testing and working to regain trust. So, I'm married now almost 10 years, and not that we don't trust each other, but we definitely, I need to set aside 3 hours on Sunday evenings for our dates because there are things that we just get overlooked when we're rushing around during the week and looking after our child. And, it's definitely work for sure. But it's a good investment, it's good to be married. Or at least my husband, I've been, pleasantly surprised, I guess is what I'm trying to say, or happily surprised with my choice. So, so we can apologize sometimes. And then the goal of an apology, as you know, is forgiveness. So the release of anger, blame, or resentment towards the violator. And so our last slide here is about idiosyncrasy credits. So our ability to violate norms with others based on what we have enough credits to cover the violation. So, right, if we can get away with these deviations from the expected norms, like or we were only late one time, or we handed in the assignment incorrectly just one time, or, we, talk to someone, without their permission just one time, then it's okay. Because we've done it correctly in other ways. But if we don't have enough credits, the violation will create a deficit, and eventually they say you can go bankrupt. So again, building integrity, making sure that we, live according to the rules and the norms of relationships. So that ends the first part of chapter 10. I hope you found that interesting. And I look forward to showing you chapter 10, part 2 in the next video.